Good evening, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, adepts, friends, fans, family, and followers to Season 5, Episode 10 of the hit underground radio occult show known as Knights of the Nephilim, brought to you by Celestial Oddities and the Coterie of Samil Arcane Occult Order. As always, I will be your host and guide on this journey into magic and mysticism, darkness, and divination. I am Frater Crow, and it's a pleasure to have you listening in this evening. Whether you're listening live, streaming after the fact, or you've downloaded this episode to your device for on the go, we do want to thank you for your patronage and support. Just make sure you click the like, share, follow, and subscribe buttons on whatever platform you are tuning in from. That way helps move us up the podcast community rankings, allows more people to discover the show, keeps you in the loop with new episodes as they air, and gives you unfiltered access to our past archives. Whether it's this show here, Knights of the Nephilim, our other shows, Celestial Oddities Paranormal Guys podcast, Caniculum Obscuritatis, Uncovering the Underground, or Last Call. We have something for absolutely everyone out there, so make sure you share it and spread it around. We do truly appreciate it. If you are someone that likes the visual aspect of the shows or the live aspect, we do bring you the show each and every week that we air across 4 Facebook pages. That is the Frater Crow, Knights of the Nephilim, Celestial Oddities Radio, and the Coterie of Samil Arcane Occult Order Facebook pages. They are live and also housed after the fact for 30 days until Facebook unfortunately deletes them as per their policy. And it is also housed live on our YouTube Knights of the Nephilim page, where it is live but housed there permanently thereafter. This allows you to not only watch it live, but drop comments, ask questions to our guest, and we will throw them up on the screen and ask your questions. We want you to be a part of the show. This is as much your show as it is ours, so please feel free to participate. And then after these shows air, we take the recorded episode and we drop it across multitude of different platforms. iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, Castbox, Amazon, Google, Spotify, you name it, we're on it. So I know some people only like the audio. They like to do it at the gym. They like to, listen while they're at work. That's for you, and it's on there. And you can always check that out within an hour from the time the show ends. And for the folks that like it live, you've been told where to check it out. So feel free to do so. Feel free to tune in and ask your questions. We want you to be a part of it, as we said. We are on episode 10, so it means we've had 9 amazing previous episodes this season, season 5. Always a great time, always amazing guests. So if you missed any of those, go back and check them out. Truly a lot of great conversation, topics, and discussions. Tonight, we walk a crossroads where continents, cultures, and the dead meet. Joining us is Alexis Arredondo, a magician and initiated practitioner in Quimbanda, Palo Mayombe, and the Tantric Aghor traditions, as well as a Santa Muere devotee of more than 20 years. Alexis is the co-author of 2 books on Mexican witchcraft and folk magic, an American spiritualist, the founder of the Mictlan Academy of Folk Magic, Sorcery, and the Occult Arts, and the co-owner of City Alchemist Witch Shop in Austin, Texas. His work stands at the convergence of necromancy, folk sorcery, and the devotional death mysticism, weaving together Latin, Afro-diasporic, and Indic pathways of power. Tonight, we explore the living underworld, where saints, spirits, ancestors, and the restless dead speak in smoke, bone, and in vow. So light your candles and put on your ceremonial attire, grab your wands and athames, and focus your desire as we step into the circle and welcome Alexis Arredondo. Good evening, brother.
Good evening, Peter Crow. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really, really excited.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. I think we have a lot to discuss tonight. I know the fans are excited. I'm excited. So appreciate you taking the time to sit with us this evening. Yes,
I'm excited. This is my first live show. So that's going to be kind of fun. Yeah.
Well, and it's fun because most shows don't do it live. There's 2, it's nice to pre-record it because you have so much control of every aspect of it after the fact before you air it. And I respect that. But there's something to be said about the raw grittiness of live shows. And that's always been my preference. Is I don't like there to be a way of taking anything away from the fans. As you see it is as you get it, guys. So, that's always been what we've been about at Knights of the Nephilim. So it's always fun. But as you said, most people really don't do the live shows that often.
Yeah.
We already have some people dropping in and saying hello. Adson, what's
Wonderful.
up, brother? Thank you so much for tuning in. Much love to you. Max Webster, thank you, brother. Sarah, thank you. And Maria, thank you so much. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started, jumping right into it. Let me go ahead and get myself ready here. So, Alexis, what first called you to Santa Muerte, and what changed in your life after you started your devotion with her?
It's a wonderful question. I think, growing up in South Texas on the border, what we call La Frontera, we have just kind of a different way of growing up. We grew up with stories of folklore of brujería, curanderismo, brujas and witches and warlocks and wizards from Mexico. And so that was something I was enamored with very, very young. And of course, it wasn't as big back then as it is now, but Dia de los Muertos in South Texas was kind of like, it was known, but it wasn't as big as it is now, thanks to movies like Coco and all kinds of things. But I was doing a project. I think I was in 6th grade. This must have been in 96. I want to say 1996, 97. And I was doing a project on Dia de los Muertos, and I had this book, which I actually have here, called Skeletons at the Feast, about Dia de los Muertos. And in that book, there were pictures of prayer cards of La Santísima Muerte. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I've never heard of Santa Muerte. And maybe I'll look up more research. Now, this is 1996 in a small town in Texas. We did not have internet. We did not have, a way to just search things up. So I didn't even get to look it up, or I couldn't find anything else about it until I moved to Corpus Christi in 2001 for college. And that's where I first saw Santa Muerte at a botanica there called J&E, which sadly closed down a few years ago. But I asked the lady there who was kind of running the shop. She called herself a bruja, a witch. And I said, tell me about this. Who is this Santa Muerte? I don't know very much about her. I've only seen prayer cards of her. And she taught me my first lesson, which I teach all my students. She said, if you work with her, the first thing you do is you light a candle and give her a glass of water, and don't do anything else. She's like, don't ask for anything. Don't do anything else. You can do a prayer if you want to do prayer, but she's like, that's it. Stick with that. And she's like, the longer you stick with that, the more of a relationship you'll have with her. And I did. So I did that for years. And I think it wasn't until 2003 that I actually truly started like going to the altar, giving her a candle, glass of water, and had a little statue for her. And then as I progressively did that for like over 2-3 years of just simple basic devotion, she started to show me how to do certain workings and how to do certain types of magic with her. I was funny because I always tell people like I hated being Catholic growing up. It was like a horrible thing for me. It was, being queer and being Catholic was not a really good combination. And then finally, when I met Santa Muerte, she was like, it's okay. You don't got to be Catholic. Just be folk Catholic. Like, just do brujeria and witchcraft. That's cool. It's the other stuff that's not so cool, And I think that essentially kind of started a pretty big journey for me. I would refer to it as a necromantic journey. Like from that point forward, learning a lot about death and the other side. That was like the biggest opening of a doorway for sure.
No, it's beautiful. And I like the fact that you mentioned the simplicity of it, because I think oftentimes and no one's at fault necessarily. It's just the way that, it's portrayed to a lot of people. We think that going in, you have to go big or go home, right? So you start out with a spirit and you load it up with offerings and gifts and sacrifice. Well, the problem with that is if you do that right from the gate, then that's going to be what's expected consistently going forward. And that's setting yourself up for failure unless you can maintain that, which isn't always feasible. So I think, as you said, going in with a lit candle, a glass of water, and just devotion speaks volumes. And if you do that, day in or week in and week out over years, before you ever ask anything, that first time you're saying, okay, I need something, it means something to you because it's the first time you're finally asking for something. And your spirits know that too. Your spirits are saying, okay, something's up, because they're actually asking for something now. And I think there's a beauty in that.
Yeah, we're an Amazon Prime type of spirituality now. We want it today, we want it tomorrow. This was at a time when we didn't have that. First off, Amazon didn't exist really back then, at least the way it is now. We had to actually wait for results. We actually had to like connect with spirit to see things and feel things and hear things.
Absolutely.
And I think nowadays more than ever, people try to rush spirituality, or I should say even buy spirituality. And that's definitely a problem.
I agree 100%. And I'm sure Yaya is listening right now, but my Yaya is telling me, don't gorge the spirits, because that's another thing, is that not only are they going to expect it, but also what makes them want to really do work for you. If every week, without even asking anything, you're like, here is all this food, all this fruit. And I think a lot of culprits, and we'll get into that a little bit later on tonight, but a lot of culprits of that is what a lot of people see in the Quimbanda scene, where they watch these videos on Instagram and they're like, holy shit, they just gave like 6 chickens and a goat and like $300 worth of fruit, and it's every week that we see them posting it. It's like, well, that's also a community and everybody's pitching in on that. If you're one practitioner, you do not need to be doing that. And if you are doing that, you're actually setting your practice backwards, not forwards. Because they're not going to work for you. They'd have no reason to want to work for you. Just feed me. Keep feeding me.
Yeah, exactly.
We got some other comments coming in here. We have Matthew saying, hi, Alexis.
Hey, Matthew.
We have Brittany saying hello. We have Sarah saying that's such a powerful truth. It certainly is take it slow, take it steady, and that devotion will certainly get you where you want to be. Now, how does death teach differently in a practice like a devotion to Santa Muerte compared to maybe something like the Aghor practice or Palo Mayombe?
It's a wonderful question. I will say this: every practice that I have been initiated to or have connection with, they all have similarities, but similarities doesn't mean the same. So even though, like, for example, I love this one. This is kind of a fun one. In the Magickal tradition, which is like the Aztec tradition, we use an aicocoli, which is basically a conch shell that we blow to the 4 directions to call forth the energy. We use the same conch shell in the Aghor practice. I've even seen it used in certain practices with Palo Mayombe. And then things like Haitian Vodou, for example, will also use them. So even though every one of these practices uses a conch shell to call forth energy, it doesn't mean that I can use that same conch shell to call anything that is necromantic. And so that's why we say they're very similar, but they're not the same. I will say that the death aspect or the death current in the Aghor tradition is not necessarily seen as an actual being. It's more so seen as just kind of part of, our idea of knowing that one day we too shall pass, and also the impermanence with that, because so many people focus on the now, what's going to happen to me now. When we actually get to a place in our minds where we're like, you know what, this could be my final moment. At any moment, this could be my final moment. We actually start to live in a much better place. We start to understand that instead of worrying so much about, well, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen today, we just kind of take every moment as it is. One of the things that always reminds me of my own mortality, my own death, if you will, is this Aghor mala that I wear that literally is made from human skull beads. Every single one of these comes from a human skull, and it's a reminder that we're going to be this one day. If you ever hold a human skull in your hand, it's like the most amazing thing ever. You finally realize, like, oh yeah, we're literally just bone and we're nothing, essentially. We're dust. And in the end, one of my favorite things that my teacher taught me in the Aghor tradition is, he said, because I told him I would love to have a skull bowl one day of like the Aghoris have. And he said, well, you already do. It's right here. He's like, it's with you all the time. He's like, you don't need one because you already have one. And I always thought that was such a great lesson. Not what I wanted to hear at the time, of course, but definitely one that I learned pretty quickly. And then with like Palo Mayombe, I feel like the death aspect of Palo Mayombe is more so connecting with death energy for work, connecting with spirits of the dead. And this is where people, I think, kind of get confused, because Palo works definitely with the dead, 100%. But we also work with all types of spirit of trees, spirit of plants, spirits of rocks. And while some people will say, well, that's not necessarily working with the dead, that's just animism, I don't see a difference. A spirit is a spirit. It literally means the spirit of something that has passed or something that has crossed. So when we're working with things like, for example, palos, the actual sticks in Palo Mayombe, those sticks come from trees. They're cut from trees, they're removed from trees, and then that stick literally dies. And you're now working with the spirit of that tree, or the spirit of that twig. So it is essentially the same thing. As much as working with a human bone, it's just as powerful because the human bone also contains spirit. Even in the Aghor tradition, the reason we use the kapala, the bowl, is because it's the top of the head, signifying where we keep our prana, right, our life force. And if we can keep that skull still in one piece, then it contains that prana, that life force, and we can use that bowl ritually or ceremonially because of that. So it's still all a form of connecting with the spirit aspect of death, as opposed to death as an actual energy. I really feel of all the practices I work with the most, Santa Muerte is that energy. She is death, and people kind of forget that. They see her more so as like an energy that walks in line with death, and I'm like, no, she's death. That's what she is. She's our incarnation of death. And there are many other incarnations, right? We have, in Europe, we have different types. We have the Grim Reaper, we have the Grim Reapress, we have, Hell, and all these other types of deities that work with the underworld. But our version of death from the Mexican perspective is Santa Muerte. So I always tell people all these necromantic paths that I ended up finding were through her, because I would say I want to work more with with the dead. I want to work more with connecting with nature. She's like, well, here's Palo. I'm like, I really want to understand more of my own darkness. What is the darkness that's within me? Oh, here's Quimbanda. And then like, oh, I want to kind of understand my own impermanence. So one day I'm going to be gone, and I need to live with that. Oh, here's the Aghor practice. It was like every single time I needed something, she kind of led me to those paths. So I always tell her, I always thank her before I even start any other ceremony or ritual, because she led me to that place.
That's beautiful. And it's actually, it's very reminiscent for myself, because for me, I started following and researching years ago the Argentinian Santa Muerte. And as I started to follow him, it led me to Liber Felxifer, following that path and going under the Samael Ben Cain path of just death, as you said, the true just face of death, walking in that understanding. And then that led me to studying Palo Mayombe, and then it led me to Quimbanda. So it was kind of a weird thing that through working with death itself, all these other doors opened up that had been absolutely beautiful, and couldn't imagine life any other way. So it's awesome to hear we walk, a similar path on that. Now, a question
I love that you said, like, through death, I couldn't imagine life any other way. That's wonderful.
That's it. Yeah, through death, couldn't imagine life any other way. Absolutely. Now that brings me to my next question, actually, because I think that there is quite a misconception. When you get into any type of left-hand path, or any type of necromancy or diabolism, or any type of form that seems to be darker to most folks, there's all these warnings, right? And I know necromancy obviously has one of the biggest, warnings. You can't work with death, and there's this misconception that working with death is going to bring much more death into your life, and there's a good chance you'll become sickly, and all these things that people hear over the years as red tape. What is the cost of working with the dead and with death?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I've always had a very strong connection to death and death energy and death currents, death magic. I think also because of my own, growing up, being a very sickly child. I was very sick all the time. There was times where I literally get to the point where I couldn't breathe because I'm asthmatic, and I would feel like I'm going to die, and then being exposed to death at a young age with my grandfather's loss and many people in my family passing. It wasn't until I actually met my previous boyfriend, who was very much into Santeria, just extremely heavily into Santeria, still is for that matter. And he introduced me to a Nifa priest And I got my what is called mano de rula, which is your one-handed ifa, and it's supposed to tell you your life path, your destiny, if you will. And so it's like, here's what things you need to do, and it gives you little things that you're not supposed to do as well, like, you know, don't have sugar, and don't have this, and don't drink alcohol. All things that I'm now regretting not listening to at the time, and now I'm like, you're right, I should have stopped drinking alcohol then. Now I'm 3 years sober. I should have stopped doing sugar. Now I'm pre-diabetic. You know, those types of things. But one of the things that came up specifically is he said, you would benefit from a path like Palo Mayombe or Quimbanda because you are very closely connected to the dead. And what's funny about that is these are the same people, Ifa priests, santeros, that will immediately tell you the opposite. They'll be like, if you're too close to the dead, you know, you're going to bring death into your life. If you're too close to the dead will haunt you, and they're going to, you know, there's a cost and all those things. What's funny about that is like, and then when I finally did get the reading from that person, it was like, actually, no, you are supposed to be with the dead. The dead are with you. I think that a big part of it for me was connecting with Santa Muerte first, because that is connecting with death. Ultimately, understanding that one day we're going to die, the end. I think that when we understand that, when we get to that connection and get to that point of, you know, could be today, could be tomorrow, right? Could be 30 years from now, whatever. Then when we start to work with the dead, it lessens the blow, if you will. It makes it makes that kind of fear. I think that's a big part of it too, is that fear kind of dissipates. And then also this idea of like, ooh, the dead, you know, kind of disappears as well. You know, like there's this one wonderful, amazing medium. She wrote a book called Beyond, and she lives out in Lilydale, big place for American spiritualism. She has an Instagram called Normalize Talking to the Dead. And I love that so much, because I think that's the truth. Like, we grew up talking to the dead. Literally, our family always had shrines or altars, or we always had pictures of people who passed, and we would talk to them like if they were still around. And I think that normalizing that aspect of, you know, working with the dead will really kind of get rid of that stigma in our brains, because I feel like it's that causes the problem. When we see the dead as this like, ooh, spooky, scary entities that are going to come around and take away our lives, then that's exactly what happens. You know, it's almost like we let our guard down in a sense. Yep. That's kind of how I feel about it. But I do think there is one price to working with the dead, and that is the stigma, right? People will always know you as the person who has the human bones, or the person who like works with the dead in that sense. So that's why people are always like, well, what are you? Are you a witch? Are you a brujo? Are you a hechicero or sorcerer? What are you? And I always say, I'm just a modern day necromancer. I work with the dead in many various different ways, whether it's, you know, as simple as, you know, sitting in a seance with some spiritualists, or, you know, calling the dead from the prenda, or whatever it may be. It's a modern day necromancy.
Yep. And I love that you can make it, you know, simple like that, because too many people want to have so many different titles and things. Hey, I'm just a necromancer. There's many different ways that I do this path, but that's what I am at the end of the day. And I think you nailed it on the head. What you expect to get out of it is going to be what you expect to get out. If you go into working with the dead and expect that it's going to make you ill, that it's going to cause people around you to start dying, that it's going to cause terror and all kinds, and that is exactly, my friends, what you're going to get. It's just like working with demons. You know, people say, oh, well, it came in monstrous form. Well, that's because you expected it to come in monstrous form, or you had some type of baggage or trauma that it showed up that way. It uses your understanding and your Pandora's box, so to speak. You open it up. It uses what's in there to show itself and says, this is how I understand, or how you can understand me.
Yes, exactly.
That's why some people see, you know, certain demons, for example, they'll say, oh, it showed up as a beautiful angel, and other people, it was terrifying. Well, it's because it was going off of your understanding of that spirit to be able to show itself. So, yeah, you know, the dead can be beautiful. Working with the dead has only ever been beautiful for me. But I know people, you know, as you said, some people just aren't meant for it. So as you had your Ifa reading and they were like, oh no, you should be working with this. I think that is an important thing, that there are some of us that this is our life's calling. Whereas other people, maybe it isn't, and they're just wanting to fit a square into a round hole, so to speak. They're trying to come in and say, well, I really like it. Well, you like it, but not everything you like should be what you do. You know, sometimes you gotta let those
spot on. It just made me think of Aleister Crowley's Goetia. Like, all the goetic demons all have giant penises, basically, because it's Aleister Crowley. Of course, all the goetic demons are going to show up with giant penises.
And that's what happens. You're like, man, he hit this spot on. But like, no, I think you were kind of anticipating this. Now, how did your initiations in practices such as Quimbanda and Palo Mayombe reshape your personal understanding of spirit relationship?
Oh, it's a wonderful question. I will say, so I came to Palo and Quimbanda through an esoteric order that I was a part of back in 2009 or 2010. I can't remember the exact year. It's called Dragon Rouge. That's Thomas Carlson's order.
I was just going to say Carlson.
I was in Thomas Carlson's order back in 2009, 2010. Started doing work through there, and then through the chat rooms and people kind of chatting and talking about different practices, I ended up coming across Palo Mayombe first. And I started learning about Palo from a local Santero, and I don't know if he's a Palero, but I know he was a Santero here in Austin. He was teaching what he knew. And then when I met my partner at the time, who was also into Santeria, he was like, you can't be involved with Palo. And I was like, okay, what's the deal? He's like, well, he's queer people can't be in Palo. That's like a big number one, no. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because up until that point, I had not heard that. And I had talked to Paleros from New York. I had talked to Paleros from all these places, but apparently that was a thing. So I was like, all right, I'll take a step back. And then he was the one that actually introduced me to Quimbanda. And this was way before Griswold's books came out or anything. It was I think he had just released his Palo Mayombe book, if I'm not mistaken. But it was, he lived in El Paso. In El Paso, they have a lot of mediums there. And they're kind of like, like in Mexico, the mediums are very specific. They call for spirit into themselves. They get mounted essentially by spirit, and then spirits come out and they give, recipes or things that you need to do. And he had a scene, a Bombajira appear through a medium in Mexico. And so that's how he learned about Bombajira and Eshu, and he started telling me all about Bombajira and Eshu, and I was like, well, that sounds amazing. And then literally, I think it was the year later, Friswold's like, I got 2 books coming out on Bombajira and Eshu. And I was like, oh, that's funny. So I started by originally getting my reading with Nicolas first, and then from there, I ended up meeting my teacher through Brazil, who was in Pelotas, which is in southern Brazil. And I will say that those practices are so similar, but they also, again, similar but not same. They are so connected, but at the same time, the way you work Quimbanda and the way you work Palo are, okay, this is the best way I can describe it. In Palo, we work with impungos, right? Impungos are forces of nature, right? We're working with Lucero of the crossroads. We're working with Cholawenge of the river. We're working Kalunga, which is a very big, powerful name also in Quimbanda, right? Working Kalunga of the ocean, the dead. In Quimbanda, we work with these spirits, essentially, that are in these kingdoms. And the way that I see it in my head, and I'm not saying this is the only way, right? This is just the way I see it, is that when we work Palo, we're working with the kingdoms directly. When we work Quimbanda, we're working with the spirits of those kingdoms. Just like how in Palo, we can also work with those spirits, but they're not called Eshus and Pombagiras. They're called Simbis, or different aspects of nature, right? So I feel like that's the connection there. That's the Congo connection, if you will. But what's funny about all of this, and again, just personal opinion, in Brujería, Mexican witchcraft, we do the exact same thing. We work Quimbanda, but we don't call it that. We call it spirit. I call forth the spirit of hate. I call forth the spirit of murder. I call forth the spirit of chaos, the spirit of trash, the spirit of disease, those types of things. And then if you look at some of these Eshus Pombagiras, some of them are the spirits of chaos.
Yep.
Some of them are the spirits of trash. Some of them are the spirits of disease. So we don't call them Eshus Pombagiras in Brujería because that's not what we were taught. We were taught just to work with spirit. But I feel like a lot of the times we're kind of slowly going over these lines. And so that's kind of like how I break it down, almost like a pyramid. So like Brujería to Quimbanda to Palo, in the sense of like spirit to nature or infinite energies.
No, that makes sense. It's beautifully put to look at it that way. That I agree. I mean, I'm not a Palero, but I agree. From my understanding, it was always working with more of the energy, as you said, the kingdom itself. And you can work with aspects within that kingdom, whereas in Quimbanda, you are working with a spirit of that kingdom specifically. And, that spirit that you have or that you're working with is just one of many under that name, under that egregoric mask that, whether it's one that you're working with, it's not in your court, or if it is a part of your court, that's your one. You know what I mean? Like I have my king is Morsego, and Morsego is a very interesting spirit to work with. But
that's mine as well. How funny!
Okay. Beautiful. My Morsego would be different than yours, though they would certainly share aspects of one another, and I couldn't imagine it once again any other way. What a another cool
Morsego. That's wonderful.
Salve, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the same way in your house, but in our house, you remember I mentioned earlier, it's about embracing our darkness, right? And in my darkness is obsession with magic. Obsessed with magic, obsessed with sorcery. And that's the story of Morsego. He was obsessed with magic. He was obsessed with sorcery. He wanted so heavily to learn the black arts, the occult arts. And then he was like, I'm going to transfigure myself into a bat. And instead he ended up becoming this like bat human vampiric creature, and all of his servants and everybody were afraid of him. And so he lived alone in his castle until he died. And that's how he became an Eshu. That's one of the stories, at least. So it's funny whenever I do, when I do have readings, because I do Quimbanda readings and I help people learn who their main Eshu Pombagira are. When somebody gets Morsego, the first thing I ask is, are you obsessed with magic? Like, are you really, really, and they're like, yeah, how'd you know? And I'm like, because you got Morsego coming here to be like, you got to calm down. Yep. You're going to end up just like him.
One of the big things I've said on the show and told other people that I've taught over the years is that, like, for me, when it comes to occultism and magic, is I don't find or figure out how to fit occultism into my life. I figure out how to fit my life into my occultism. And it's all I do. When I'm not with my family, when I'm not working, the only thing I do is read, research, practice. Just like you walk several different paths, very voraciously and dedicated. And it's that, I think that's why, Morsego chose us, is because, as you said, we can't seem to fill our hunger for magic.
Nope, we never will.
That's okay, though. I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with that too. I find that too. My retirement plan is literally right behind this camera, which is millions of books that I have here. And I'm like, one day I'm going to retire and just be able to read all of these over and over and over and over again.
Yep. And you can't see it here, but right above me, there's an entire library that goes around this whole area. It's just nothing but books, hundreds of occult books. And I don't read anything.
We're in our Morsego cave right now.
That is. I'm right in my cave. I love it. Yeah, what my best friend here just left a comment, says fits because she knows. Ironically enough, she has Morsego also, and she's absolutely
cool
with magic. So it's Morsego night, guys.
That's wonderful.
All right, let's go ahead here and jump back. And all right, my thing just froze. There we go. So we're going to talk about a little bit more about Quimbanda and Palo Mayombe. How do you discern Eshu communication from ancestral voices?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the things that I was taught by my teacher, and again, every Quimbanda house is different. Remember that. And please, those of you that are out there listening about this for the first time, remember that every Quimbanda house is different. Very few of them are exactly the same. They're based in similar, paths and tradition, but even like in our house, I think your house, you all use the term yaya. In our house, we don't use yaya. We use mai and bai. So there's differences, but it doesn't mean they're wrong. Explain that again. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means they're different. So in our house, we are taught that a lot of our Eshus and Pombagiras do come from our ancestors. Because, for example, I'll give you an example. My current partner heavily matas, like the woods. Very heavily of the matas has Pombagira Figueira das Matas. When he got his reading in Candomblé, he was Ochosi, made total sense, like the woods and things like that. His family, all farmers, cotton pickers, watermelon pickers. Like, they were heavy into farm, and they farmed in their own, and they were into farm, and they were also in the other side into ocean. And he's got a lot of Kalunga as well. So it's like sometimes our ancestry kind of connects our Eshus to who we are. I will say this though, ancestors, when they come to me, they usually have, I guess the best way to describe it would be like a trigger, something that lets me know it's them. So a good example of this, my great-grandmother used to sing at the church. So every time that she shows up, I hear her singing. And that's how I know it's her, right? My grandmother as well, for that matter, but she's recently passed. So it's going to be a while before she starts showing up. Although she's been trying, and I keep telling her, like, you got to calm down. You got some stuff to do on the other side first. When Eshu and Pombagira show up, you probably know this already. It's hot. It's fiery. It's twisty and turny. Sometimes it's very. It would be what most people would consider demonic, right?
Yeah.
Some people say, "Oh, there's demonic forces here." Like, no, not necessarily. It's just Eshu and Pombagira. They're hot, fiery spirits, very much like the Pétolois of Haitian Vodou. They come in with that energy. Sometimes very sexual, sometimes very jokey, like to the point where they want to play jokes with you and tricks, things like that. The Palo Mayombe forces come forth with the energy of a tornado, the energy of a tsunami. They're heavy feeling forces. The only one I would say that doesn't come in that heavy is probably Lucero. Lucero does come in with some heavier energy, but he's also a little more Eshu, a little more playful. Some houses, Lucero is a little child, right? Very similar to a Legua. In mine specifically, my Lucero is Cuatro Viento, which means like four corners. And so he comes in and he's also connected to the wind. He comes in with almost like what feels like four winds coming together, right? That's the best way to describe it. And when I feel his energy, it almost feels like somebody took a bowl of ice and just poured it over my back and just like shoved it down, like that type of energy. So I will say that's probably the biggest distinction, is that ancestors come in with their personality and life, right? So very human personality. Eshus and Pombagiras, very hot, fiery. If you've ever worked with the Pétolois Vodou, they're very similar. And we could go into that forever too. If we had like a voodoo practitioner here, we could talk about that forever. And then the nature spirits come in with forces of nature. And that's why I have to explain that to people in Paulo. There's very little human element to the Impungo, right? Impungo are wild. They're forces of nature. We cannot tame nature. It's impossible for us to tame a tornado. We can't tame a tsunami. We can't tame those things. But what we can do is put a human passenger or a human person in the driver's seat. And so that's why you see human bones, the necromantic aspect of Paulo, in the pots, right? Those human bones are what drives the bus, right? The bus is a crazy ass force of nature, and the human bones are the human element. So we work with that spirit, and that spirit now has been fortified with the element of the mountain, the river, the ocean, whatever it may be. And so that's the necromantic aspect of Palo. Everybody is like, oh, why is it necromantic? It's like, well, we work with human bones. And the reason why is because we're working that spirit, that energy. That's why they tell you never say the name of the person that's in your pot, because if somebody knows the name of that person, then they know the name of your pot. They have dominion over them, which I don't necessarily believe, but I mean, I can see why people would say that. It makes sense.
There's a lot of caution on those things, though, as well. I mean, there's some people that will tell you don't ever tell anybody who your Eshus and Pompigiers are, because they could use that against you. And I mean, that's possible. But at the same time, I feel like I've never been one to hide any aspects of my practice that unless it's something truly needs to be kept secret. You can find out who my spirits are. You can try to use them against me. It's not to say that you couldn't, obviously do something, but I feel pretty fortified in most of the areas. So it's like, if you're going to try it, go ahead and try it. So
that's literally what I say. Like, you can literally go look at some of the videos of my students in my academy. And I always say it all the time. I'm like, if you want to curse me, you want to hex me, you want to try to take my spirits, by all means, go for it. I'm not going to be responsible for what happens to you.
Yep. That's exactly
they
it.
Are.
You strike at me and something happens to you, hey.
Yeah.
Sorry about it, but I'm not sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a question I wanted to bring up, since we're actually on the topic, is what do you think distinguishes Palo in Vivo or living Palo versus someone who just practices Palo? Because even, for example, in the Quimbanda realm, there's so many people that sit with their spirits. They talk to their spirits from time to time, but they're not really living Quimbanda. I think there's a big difference between living your practice than just kind of sitting in front of your altar or dabbling with your practice.
I'm really glad you asked this, because this is something I teach a lot to my students, that you can be a dabbler, you can be a practitioner, or you can actually be somebody who lives with spirit, right? So in the case of Palo, let's go with Palo first. In the case of Palo, if I so much as feel wind on my face, I don't go, oh, what a beautiful windy day. I immediately say, Centea. Thank you, Centea, for gracing me with your presence today, because that's Centea's energy. If I so much as look outside first thing in the morning, I don't just go, oh, what a beautiful sunny day. I say blessings to Entango, right, to the sun, because the sun is what rises every day. It gives us that energy. When we look into the moon, right, and every single aspect of that, looking at a full moon and looking at a new moon and being able to make the distinction between whether that's Luna Nueva or whatever those things are, that's the spiritual path of Palo. Every time, I live 6 blocks away from my shop, and there's a railroad crossing. Every single time I cross that railroad, I'm thanking Sarabanda, Awiriko Nganga Sarabanda, reminding him that I remember him every day, because I cross Sarabanda every day. Every time I cross a crossroads, right? Awiriko Nganga Lucero. Awiriko meaning like, not blessing, but more so kind of like salute, right? Mm-hmm. So every time that we're doing those things, we're connecting to spirit. If I so much as see, and this used to happen a lot when I lived on the east side, if I so much as see an old black man standing on the corner of a crossroads, I have to acknowledge, what spirit is that? Is that Lucero? Is that a Legua? What color is he wearing? Is that an Eshu? Those types of things. Even though some people may look at me and be like, that's just some man standing on the corner.
Yeah,
I'm going to say, to you, that's some man. To you, that's some man standing on the corner. To me, that's a sign. And it's the same way even with Santa Muerte. Like, she lets me know when I need to go to her altar, when there's something wrong or there's something off. And usually it's by, I tell people all the time, squirrels. If I see a dead squirrel, that's her sign. Because the one time I was driving to work and I saw a squirrel get hit by a car, and I saw that squirrel die right there, like convulse and then pass. Immediately I saw Santa Muerte just standing there right next to her. And I was like, wow, okay, so that's death, So now she lets me know when I see a squirrel, she's like, hey, you got to go check the altar. Something's up. You need to go pull out your cards. We need to connect. There's something that you need to see that you're not seeing. With Quimbanda, it's kind of in the same boat, right? People think, oh, I haven't been giving my candle to my Eshu or Pomajita. I haven't sang my song to them in a while. I haven't sang their song. I said, okay, but are you working with them? Are you listening to them? Are you connecting with them even whenever you're not necessarily at their asentamiento, right? Because you can, even just by wearing a certain item of clothing, wearing their, not just wearing their gia, but also like wearing something that belongs to them, right? If we, without us, we have bats, right? Morcego, we have bats. We could wear something with a bat on it, and that's Morcego. Mm-hmm. Whereas some people would say, oh, what a cute little bat pendant. I'm like, yeah, it's a bat pendant to you, but to me, this is a reminder of who my guardian is. Uh-huh. Who's my issue. So I think that that's what makes the distinction between somebody who really lives spiritually and connects to their spirits consistently, and then somebody who just kind of like, I dabble or I'm wanting to learn, that type of thing. And I feel like, I'm not saying it's wrong to not to do that directly, but the goal should be to connect to spirit all day, every day. That's the goal. Even with Santa Muerte, for example, people say, oh, you must be at Santa Muerte's altar all the time, lighting candles for her. I said, not really. I did that for 20 years. Now we're just like, she lets me know when I need something. I go to her, I refresh her altar every few months or so. And they're like, well, your altar must be big and beautiful. No, my altar is like this big, maybe like 18 inches by 12 inches. It's a small space because it's just my dedicated space to her, but she doesn't live there. She doesn't live in an altar. She's everywhere, right? Yep. Just like the spirits are everywhere. They don't live in your prenda. They don't live in your asentamiento. That's just where they settle. That's where their energy settles. That's what it's called, a settlement.
I think it's big for people to understand that aspect right there, because I think people get too tied into believing that their altar is like their one space where that spirit lives for them. They're like, I got to go to my altar to talk to the spirit. Well, you can, and that is your devotional place for that spirit. Mm-hmm. But that spirit, and once again, it depending upon your level of dedication to that spirit and working with them, that spirit's going to be with you and walking with you. So you don't need, you could talk to them right wherever you're at. You can do it while you're at work. You can do it while you're on your drive home. They're going to be with you. But I think that there's that misconception of like, oh, I need to work with this spirit. I need to get home to my temple. And it's like, well, you can, but you're missing the point. And that might be part of the problem, is that if you're only talking to that spirit when you have time to go into your altar, as you said, you're missing that aspect of every time you cross the railroad tracks, every time you are sitting by a body of water and giving thanks. Anytime you see something that sparks that, you can have a life with spirit or a spiritual life. And there is a difference, guys. And I think the more that you include and incorporate spirit into your life, the more spiritual of a life you have. I think, and a big part that my cult is into, and that I teach my students, is that prayer. And people get thrown off by that a lot because I'm a diabolist, so they say prayer, and I'm like, oh, I absolutely love prayer. And I push and require that anybody that's a part of the cult does prayer in the morning, in the afternoon, later in the afternoon, and in the evening. So you're doing morning, lunch, afternoon, and evening. And the reason being is it's always taking time out of every day to remember yourself, remember being here, remember creation, remember every aspect of it. And our prayers are pretty in depth. That we touch so many different aspects of magic within those prayers, that it's a way that even if you're not able to do work that day, that week, you're still doing work. Mm-hmm. But there's also strict regulations on the work too. So we're always doing work. Yes. But it's that backup that you don't go a day without prayer. This doesn't happen with us.
I always tell my students the altars exist for us. Yep. Because sometimes we don't understand, we cannot comprehend, well, how do I bring energy in using this deity, this energy, this spirit? Okay, well, I know that if I light a candle, that's one thing, right? I know that if I have a green candle and I put a dollar bill under it, I'm going to invoke the energy of money. Mm-hmm. Okay, but you know that you can also do that yourself, right? Yeah. But as students, yes, by all means, go to the altar, learn to work the altar, and then eventually you can take a step back and then work with spirit away from the altar, right? So I think that that's the biggest thing I tell my students all the time. Like, the altar is literally your dedication space. We live in a time now where we have to pay like thousands of dollars for rent. So if you're giving a dedicated space to your spirit in your home, you're literally paying rent for that space. That's your dedication.
Yep.
Taking the time to remember them and say, hey, this space is for you. Even though I'm barely fitting in this place because of all these books and stuff, I'm still going to have a dedicated space just for your energy, because that's how much I care about you and you being in my life.
And that's important because it goes into the depths of sacrifice. People oftentimes misunderstand sacrifice. Sacrifice is so many things. As you said, I don't have a lot of room here, but I'm giving you this space. That is a sacrifice to give to your spirit that space. It's a sacrifice to constantly remember them and go and spend time. Prayers, for example, like I just mentioned, that's a sacrifice to your spirit, because you're going to say, oh, an hour every single day I'm giving up to prayer no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I know my day is busy. I know I'm tired tonight. I really don't want to do prayer, but God damn it, I'm going to do prayer because I need to, and that's my sacrifice. So I think that that's important, that we understand that it's not always just a physical item. It's time, it's energy, it's the loss of sleep, it's the waking up early to do ritual when you could be sleeping in. That is sacrifice.
What's sleep?
What is sleep, right? You know, I don't know what it is. And another thing, like you said, and I love that you said it, is the highlight reel, for example. When you do ritual, let's say a money working, over and over again, to the point where you can just play it in your head. You close your eyes and have the highlight reel. You're able to then, as you said, Alexis, go back anytime and pull that file out and play it without the altar then, because it lives in you. And that's important, as you are making space for all of the different workings and energies and spirits you work with to then live inside of you through experience. We can always pull that back without tools. We, as humans, like tools. We like things. We like objects. We're materialists, right? We love items.
All these tools back here.
Speaking of which, we did get a comment of someone that says they love a Brit said she loves the painting. I'm guessing she's talking about the Poe painting, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But I didn't get a chance to throw that up, brother. So since you said behind me, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, we love tools, but it's like I tell my students, like, for example, ritual magic. People think, oh, I'm going to set up my ritual magic, altar and my tools, and I'm going to have all my pieces. And it's like, well, guess what? That's just to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have learned and you've mastered all those ceremonies, then you can start doing it up here, and then you do it in the ether, and then you can do it while you're sleeping, and you don't need to bring all the tools out anymore. That's just for us to start, because again, we need it because, and I say this in all, not to be rude in any way, but we are very simple-minded people.
Oh yeah.
So, for example, this is a good example with Quimbanda. I can't tell you how many times people are like, well, I need to find a statue. I need a statue. I need a statue. And I'm like, you don't need a statue. The only reason you need a statue is because you want to know, what do Eshun Pomajira look like? But guess what? They don't look like the statues.
No.
That's not what they look like. That's just for us to understand what they are capable of, what they can do for us, right? If we see a Pomajira with a knife, we know she's going to defend us, right? If we see an Eshu with wings, we know that he can fly, We know that if he's got fire around him, we know that he can control fire, like those types of things. So that's just because we're so simple-minded, we need a representation of that. But like for us, for example, in our Quimbanda shrine, we used to have statues for galore. And then as we started working more with our settlements, we were like, we don't need these anymore. We have the settlements. Why do we have these statues here? So we started slowly getting rid of the statues and saying, you know what, let's just focus on the settlement. The settlement is all we need, because that is the Eshu, that is the Pomajira. It's not the actual statue.
That becomes your focal point. Yeah, you don't really need the iconography as much because you have that focal point. And like you said, they're not going to look like the statue. Yeah, that might help you get in touch with them. But I can tell you, for example, I have a beautiful, huge Morcego statue over there. He doesn't look like that. I have Capa Preta as my other spirit, and I can tell you that no iconography that I've ever seen of Capa Preta looks anything like mine. In fact, it's quite wild what mine looks like in comparison to everything you see. So it is a great tool to use, but I think the whole point of magic, as has always been said, is to get to the point where you don't even need to do the ritual, and the magic happens before you do it. You think the thought and it happens, and you're like, well, I haven't even done the dance yet. But it's still fun to do the dance sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
We have some comments coming in here. Let me throw up. Britt said, yep, she was talking about the Poe picture. And Jerry says, hello, family. Really enjoying tonight's episode. Thank you, and Jerry. Appreciate it.
And Jerry.
We have a comment that I missed earlier, and I want to throw it up now. What a wonderful guest today, Frauder. Alexis's way of articulating his knowledge in witchcraft on its own. Thank you both. You're welcome,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
All right, so let's jump back here real quick. So let's switch gears slightly, not a whole lot, and then we're gonna switch completely. I want to talk about the Aghor practices. You know, how did the Tantric Aghor tradition transform your relationship with three very pivotal things that they focus on, which obviously is purity, fear, and the body? How did these three concepts, how did it transform your relationship with those things?
The Aghor practice it's one of those things that I've always wanted to share more of, but it's hard to share because it's very hard concepts to grasp.
Yeah, it is.
I always tell people, because people are like, I'm very interested in the Aghor practice. And I say, well, the best thing that you can do is go research it, because it's not at all what you think it's going to be. And then the things that you think are not going to be it are exactly what it is. So the Aghor practice teaches us essentially that what matters more than anything in this life is selfless service. And what's funny about that is that is what magicians do. That is what practitioners do. We serve community. As spiritualists, we serve community. As for myself, I have a shop. I serve community. That is selfless service. That's an act of service that is not for me to be like, come look at me and my most amazing shop and the most amazing things that I have. It's more so like, you need help and I'm willing to help you. I'm going to have my spirits help you in any way that I can. And all I need from you is for you to have faith in your spirits and your guides. Another aspect of the Aghor practice is understanding the body, for example. It doesn't mean like, well, I got to look at my body and see my physicality. It's understanding that you and me, even though you come from a different ethnic background and maybe have a completely different upbringing, if I were to take all the things that are around you and remove them slowly but surely, the only thing that's left is bones.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with me. And the same thing with any person of color, any queer person, any person that we may hate or just dislike very, very much so. If we just take it all away, take away what we call illusion, Maya, then what's left is bones, because we're all the same. And it's our illusion that changes that, right? Our illusion says, you and I are not the same because I'm Hispanic and you're of Caucasian descent, right? You and I are not the same because you grew up in this type of environment and I grew up in this type of environment. And it's that illusion that causes us to start to have hate toward each other or start to dislike one another or see differences. But the truth is that we're not different in any way. We're all, for the most part, human, and we're all going to die one day and be dust one day. And so that's that understanding of the body aspect of Aghor, is that it's not body. And there is a part of it that's very much the Ayurveda understanding of what the body is and connecting to elements and all that more mystical aspect to it. But it's more so understanding the removal of everything and how at the end of the day, we're all just bones and dust and ash too. That's a big thing too, as well.
I think it's beautiful to recognize that, though, to be able to say, like, at the end of the day, we are all bones, because, as you mentioned earlier, bones are a huge part of my practice. And as you said, holding a human skull in your hands, staring at it, saying, this is all I am. I'm just this. This was a person at one point in time. And while it still is, this is just a brain cage. You know what I mean? And then, like you said, holding the Kapala. And even if you are to use it for something like a drink or to eat out of it, it makes it even more visceral and real to say this is just being used as a bowl. But this was a skull at one point in time. This was a person. It starts to change your understanding of, like, wow, reality is so much different than, as you said, breaking Maya. This is so much different than I thought. And we've done practices of the 14-day death meditations to, as you said, walk with death. one of my favorite authors of all time is Carlos Castaneda, and the whole walk with your death, become friends, make death your ally. Stuck with me so much when I was younger that I'm like, man, and I followed his words, and it changed my life because, yeah, as you realize we are all bones, and this world will do everything it can to cause division. It'll do everything it can to make us pinpoint why I'm different than you, you're different than me and her and him. But none of it matters at the end of the day because we all are just bones in a physical experience right now, but we're spirit. That's it, spirit and bone.
Yep. You know, the Aghor ascetics live in the cremation grounds so that they can see death and be a part of death every day. They see people being burned every day. They will take things from the dead body to clothe themselves, to feed themselves, to use as an alms bowl for, you know, asking for money or whatever that may be. But when I was talking to my teacher about that, I'm like, you know, it'd be so amazing one day to go to the cremation grounds and do my sadhana, do my ritual ceremony there. He said, yes, you're right. It's wonderful to go to the cremation ground, see it for yourself, and be a part of that. But it's even harder for us to live in the cremation grounds of our own mind and live in this reality, as opposed to an ascetic who can actually live in the cremation grounds and see that every day. It's even harder for us as what he calls grahasti, which are householders, people just like me and you who have jobs and still are spiritual. It's harder for us to live in the cremation grounds of our head, knowing the things that we know, and then still trying to live a normal life, still trying to go to job and go to work every day.
That makes
because
sense.
they don't have to do that. They literally stay at the cremation grounds.
Yeah, can you imagine the freedom of, while it's terrifying to most people and while it's extremely hard in one aspect, can you imagine just letting go of house and home and family and riches and everything you have and just being, to just be truly with spirit? It's you, your mind and your spirit, you know, and the forces you work with is quite a beautiful thing. So while that is such a difficult thing and we can't fathom it as you know, householders, as you said, as folks that have jobs and have to you know, tend to family and things, it's also from their aspect very hard for them to imagine us, as you mentioned, because you know, we have so many things, we're part of so many things over here, right? I mean, our days are like planned out of, this is the 50, 60, 70 things I got to do this week.
Exactly.
And it's like, do you though? Because like all of them are self-appointed, you know, and that is, it's hard to live with that, and that's a challenge for us. I think that we don't you know, I can't talk tonight. We don't commonly reflect about, but when you do, you start to say, wow, like as we mentioned earlier, I look at life so much differently. I'm doing this to myself. What can I cut out of my life? What am I poisoning myself with? You made a mention earlier to like alcohol and sugar and things. I've cut out alcohol and sugar in my life. Something I love them both. But it was something like, you know what? I don't need these. It's something that's a poison, and it's how they kill us. It's why it's pushed so much on us. It's something we start to cut out, and we start to become more in tune with what's within. So it's quite a beautiful.
Well, that is the Maya. That's the illusion. Like, oh, I must have the chocolate cake because the chocolate cake is going to taste amazing and it's going to be so good. And then after you eat it, what happens? Nothing.
Yeah, you feel like shit afterwards. And like, that didn't
feel
do
like
anything
shit,
for
or
me.
you know, your blood sugar went up, or you know, but it's like, oh, that there was literally no purpose to that. It's the same way, and this is where you're probably gonna be like, what? It's the same way sometimes. I mean, obviously, with physical things, you know, we say, oh, I can't wait to get this one thing. If I have this one thing, this one rare book, this one that, once I have it, I'm gonna be so happy, so happy. And then we get it, we're like, wow, I have it. All right, I'm gonna put that on the shelf and go look for the next best thing, right? It's the same thing. It's an illusion.
I agree.
And
I should feel personally attacked, but I don't. I agree 100%
I'm
because
attacking myself.
you wouldn't believe how many times I bought a book that's just ridiculous that I would spend that much money on a book, and I got it. It's beautiful, and I look at it, I'm like, wow. And then, like you said, 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh, look at that.
Yes.
I'm a Taurus through and through, so it's like I love
I'm a Taurus too.
That's why we're so alike. Okay, it's like I'm like, man, I really need that. And then I get it, and I'm like, I didn't need this at all. What's the next thing? So it's harder for us, I think, to separate ourselves from that and say, you know what, these are just items. These have no value.
Yep.
Now, looking at my next question here, in your eyes, what defines authentic Mexican folk magic?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so in this day and age, especially, we hear a lot of people saying, "I'm a brujo, I'm a bruja, I practice brujería, I practice this, practice that," and 99% of the time, they have no idea what they're talking about. And I'm not saying that to be mean or to be, to be cruel in any way. It's just that we need to look at what the actual definitions of these words mean, right?
Mhm.
A bruja is a witch. A brujería is witchcraft. A curandero or curandera is a healer, a folk healer, and curanderismo is folk healing. Hechicería, which literally means sorcery or folk magic, is the practice of Mexican folk magic. So somebody who practices that could be like an hechicero. But what happens is people think I practice magic, therefore I am a witch. Not necessarily the same thing, right? It's like even here in the United States, you can practice magic and still not be a witch, and you can also be a witch and not practice magic. You can just do ceremony, follow the wheel of the year, whatever your version of witchcraft is, right? If it's satanic witchcraft, whatever. But you can still practice that as a religion or as a spiritual practice and still not do magic, right? They're separated. But nowadays, we're starting to see kind of like a culmination of everything. And so we hear, oh, I read tarot cards, I'm a bruja because I'm from Mexican descent. Well, no, not necessarily. You just read tarot cards, right?
Yeah.
And that's my soapbox speech, and I'll get down from there for a while. But I say that because, to me, a lot of what we actually do practice in Mexican households is folk magic. It's not witchcraft. It's not curanderismo. It's mostly folk magic. We do a lot of folk magic. Even our ancestors do folk magic. Our mothers and fathers do it and don't even realize they're doing it, right? Whenever, I get a good example of this, at my mom's house, there's a rosary on the corner of every bed. And people are like, oh, well, there's a rosary because you all are Catholic, so therefore there's a rosary on the corner of every bed. No, there's a rosary on the corner of every bed because it protects us from evil energies. That's the reason, that's its purpose. There's a cross made out of palm that comes from a church above the door, not because, oh, we made a cross and it's cute and we put it above the door, because it's there to remove negative energies or keep negative energies out. There's a picture of San Ignacio by the door to remove negativity. There's a Saint Anthony statue hung upside down because the eldest daughter hasn't found a husband yet, and he's going to hang upside down until we finally found one. Those are folk magical practices. There's something that not necessarily written, and they are now, but at the time they're just kind of passed down. Like, oh, your daughter can't find a husband, just take St. Anthony, hang him upside down, and he gets upset about it and makes her find a husband, and then he can put him upside down. Same thing with Santa Muerte we see even now. It's like people take away her scythe or they take away her globe, and they say, I'm not giving this back to you until you do what I need done for me, which you don't recommend doing if you're starting out. If you have a rapport with her, just like I say, like in my classes, I say it should be like a best friend type of thing. Like I wouldn't go over to your house, for example, and you just start bossing me around. I'd be like, I don't even know you. Like, we've only met once, But if we hang out all the time, we're talking all the time, every time I come over to your house, you're like, hey, do you want some water? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'd love some water. Hey, I got an apple for you. Would you like an apple? Oh, I love apples. Okay, cool. I got chocolate. I'm like, oh, I love chocolate. It's my favorite. And the more I go over to your house, we start becoming really good friends. And then one day you're like, hey, I got something I need done. Do you think you can help me? Absolutely, of course. I would love to help you because we're friends.
Yep. Agreed.
But if I came over to your house the first time, I'm like, I'm not your friend. I don't know why you're bossing me around and asking me to do things. I barely met you for the first time. Maybe one favor here and there, but not a bunch. So I think that folk magic is simply just the magical practices that we do every day, right? Whether it's putting a cross under our shoe to make sure that we don't have brujeria on us, or hanging aloe vera upside down in our house so that witchcraft doesn't come into the house, things like that, which you'll see even at restaurants sometimes, even here. It's just what we do. It's a folk practice. But what I see and hear a lot, running a witch shop especially, is people coming in saying, my grandmother was a curandera. And I'm like, oh, cool. I had no, like, that's awesome. Like, did she train or did she have a practice? It's like, oh, she would rub the egg on me all the time when I got sick, and she would crack it in a glass and put it under the bed. And I was like, oh, okay. And did she do anything else? And she's like, no, mostly just that.
No, she's
Well,
not
then
that, yeah.
she's not a curandera then. That's folk magic.
Yep.
That is a folk healing. That is literally a folk healing. It doesn't mean that she's a curandera. Curandera is a healer. They train, they learn. They're usually given the title by their community, right? The community says, go see the curandero or the curandera. Same thing a lot of times, even with brujos and brujas. It's like, oh, go see the brujo. He'll take care of you. Go see the Wickham, I support. That's so funny. Go see the bruja. She'll do what needs to get done. But where I grew up, you don't say those words, the brujo and bruja, unless you actually mean those words, because that was somebody who, for lack of a better term, and excuse my French, could really fuck you up.
Yeah, they were deadly. You didn't mess with them.
Yes. I mean, they worked with the devil. They worked with really dark spirits. I mean, when I first started learning from a bruja, I was in high school. She had a house that was separate from her house. It was like on the same land, but it was like a dilapidated, like rundown, falling down house that they didn't live in anymore. So she turned that into her witch house, as she called it. And you would think, like, in your mind right now, you heard witch house and you were like, ooh, cauldrons and, you know, brooms and all those things kind of popped in your head. But no, it was literally like animal parts and seeds everywhere and like packets of herbs thrown all over the kitchen and things on fire and like dead animal things hanging in the ceiling. You know, it was not at all what you expect when you hear like a witch house. It was literally brujeria. It's like brujeria
true witchcraft. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's what we would probably consider, to me at least, a little closer to like Palo or like traditional witchcraft. You know, like working with animals and working with things like that.
No, and that's, I think titles, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, get thrown around too much. And I think part of it's misunderstanding, and I think part of it's ego stroke. I think a lot of people like to throw terms around because it makes them feel like, oh, fuck yeah. You know, like, so for example, within my practice, one of my large chunks of my practice, aside from Quimbanda, is Qliphothic pathworkings and Qliphothic sorcery. Now, the problem with that is that term gets thrown around so much these days. And when you come to sources like you said, Dragon Rouge and Carlson and stuff, you're going to hear that a lot, and you're coming from official practitioners. But it became this popular thing that everyone nowadays talks about the Qliphoth and working with the City Alchemist, and that's great. But most of these people saying it never have actually worked with it or have no fucking clue what they're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, you work with these elements, huh? And I'm like, I don't know, bro, because you're telling me things that don't seem to be alarming enough to make me believe you're working with these spirits, because they're very alien, they're very adverse, and there's really no give and take to them. They're brute. And people just throw that around. It's one of those things that, like, oh, well, if I say that, people have any inkling of what it means, they're going to be like, oh, look at this badass. And and that's a shame, because, you know, that's really just going to get yourself hurt in the end, you know, fucking around with things you shouldn't. So I completely understand that, you know, people like to throw those terms around. Like you said, oh, I read tarot cards, so I'm a bruja. No, you're a tarot reader, bro. But I guess it gives them
I always refer to them as like the Zach Bagans of the occult community.
Yep.
Like, you know, they're like the ghost hunters of the occult community. They're like, I work with demons, bro. Like that type of thing. Like it comes off very much. I study the Qliphoth, man. It's like, really? So tell me a little bit more. And they're like, yeah, you know, Lilith, and you know, and then they just kind of like start going way off, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. And I mean, again, I work in an occult shop, so I see these people all the time.
No, and that's it, man. They're everywhere. My friend who was on the chat earlier, this one right here I threw up, Natasha, she was saying literally my night tonight to something you said earlier, because she actually had to go out and help a family whose loved one just passed. She was helping that kind of come to terms with that. She had a witchcraft shop here in Pennsylvania, and we've seen it all the time with a lot of people coming over just saying things that were radical. It's like, all right, man, you live that life, brother. You get it. But, you know, I guess whatever helps people, if they're going around saying that, we both actually, the two of us and several others, have a paranormal team that we go out all over the country, but not for that reason of filming or documentaries. No, just to talk to the dead and talk to spirits.
Yeah.
And people all the time bring that up. They're like, oh, you know, they'll throw random names. I'm like, oh, Zach Baggins. I'm like, no, bro,
No, not at all.
not at all, not quite. I'm like, I'm here to actually do the work, and you don't see any cameras because I don't give a shit about filming it. But you know, people have to have that, like I said, that ego stroke. It's a big thing these days now more than ever. What do you think, whether it's brujeria or whether it's Mexican folk magic, what do you think that the Mexican magic aspect preserves that something maybe like European witchcraft has lost?
Well, you know, and people are going to hate me for saying this. I do feel like brujeria and the more like European style, like traditional witchcraft, or just like European satanic witchcraft for that matter, are very similar. And the reason for that is because you have to look at the history, right? So prior to colonization, a lot of the people who were practicing witchcraft, let's say in the Mexica Aztec time, they were utilizing things like, you know, corn and certain plants and certain animals, mostly turkeys, wild hogs, things like that, right? They were using those types of things as a way to practice their witchcraft. They were doing sacrifices. They would remove the hearts and give the hearts to their gods, and then they would connect to those gods with those theots, and then ask for certain things to happen, those types of things. So then here comes colonization. Colonization brings Christianity, and with Christianity comes the adversary, right? There's the devil. And so they're like, you can't practice this Aztec Mexica ritual stuff because that is of the devil. And then they're like, well, what's the devil? And like, well, the devil is like this guy who does horrible things, and there's witches, and they do sacrifices and yada yada yada. And so they're like, oh, well, we do sacrifices. They're like, no, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. They sacrifice, you know, animals, and then by doing that, they get these gifts. It's like, oh, well, that's what we do, right? And so what happened is a lot of the brujeria in Aztec Mexica also got colonized. And then here comes a new superpower. Well, like, and you know what? You don't have to go to Tezcatlipoca for this anymore. And you don't have to go to Tlaxotea for this anymore. There's one source now. There's the devil. Just go to the devil, and the devil will do everything for you. So then a lot of those European practices, especially a lot of the stuff that was influenced by European Christians, honestly, to be honest, like the woodcuts of like them, you know, throwing things in the fire, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
All of that started becoming the ritual and the magic and witchcraft of Mexico. And so that's why it is so intense, right? In a sense, it's like it's European witchcraft on steroids, in a sense, because it was already a pretty intense practice, and then you added more to it. And then you had books like, you know, Cyprian, the Grimoire of Saint Cyprian, come out with how to work with, you know, the black pullet, and how to work with the goat and the cabra infernal and all these things. So those all culminated into what we know as witchcraft in Mexico today. I do feel that, you know, with the exception of, and even then, like traditional witchcraft also kind of plays it safe a lot these days. But I do feel like the traditional witchcraft I'm aware of, or the one that I feel like I connect to more so, maybe because of my Mexican background or Mexican heritage, ancestry, is more like that style of witchcraft. And I'm saying I'm going to go over there like killing animals and pulling out their hearts or anything. Sometimes we have to do that for Palo and Quimbanda, but it's more so like the gritty nature aspect, and it's kind of what Palo has taught me, right? And I tell people this all the time. Palo is what witchcraft used to be. It working with spirit, working with the dead, working with nature, gathering from nature, gathering certain elements and things from nature, and creating spirit pots, essentially. That's what witchcraft used to be, and kind of what it still kind of is sometimes in Mexico. It's why people in Mexico see things like Palo and even Quimbanda now, which is getting really big in Mexico, and they're so like turned on by it. It's a super juicy thing for them because it's like, oh, that's cool. That's kind of what we do, but you have a system. Yeah. We don't have a system, and we're over here killing chickens, and we're doing it the wrong way, but y'all know how to do it the right way, so we'll learn from you now. And so if you look at like the brujos in Catamaco, especially, you'll see a lot of things being mixed in there. You start to see pontos and you start to see firmas, and we saw a lot of that happen in the 90s with that one guy who messed everything up for Santa Muerte. What was his name? I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he wrote a book on Palo Mayombe, and he created that firma for Santa Muerte that now everybody uses. We call it the pineapple because it looks like a pineapple, but it was a firma that he created, and he said, this is Santa Muerte's firma, but he literally just kind of made it up. And then all of a sudden, everybody was using this firma for Santa Muerte, but that is technically, even if you know Palo and you know how to read the firmas, you realize it doesn't make any sense. It's not at all connected to any energy, much less to Santa Muerte. But that kind of starts happening a lot in Mexico, this like mixing of other things coming together, and then just calling it witchcraft, calling it something else. And then, of course, and you can't talk about Palo without talking about this, especially in Texas, the Mark Kilroy case, the murder of Mark Kilroy, of the UT student here back in the 80s, who was killed by some paleros in Mexico. And they were like, oh, palo, they were doing palo, and that's what killed him. They're like, no, if you actually look at what they were doing, they were mixing it all up. They were mixing palo with other stuff. They even had Santa Muerte statues at the shrine when they got busted. So it's people kind of going in with no education, so to speak. And so because of that, they're mixing things up in a bad way. And we're still seeing that today, unfortunately, because this is why I always educate people with Santa Muerte, with Palo, that there is a system in place for a reason. Because if not, if you start to go too far left, you end up going way far left, and then you end up getting in a lot of trouble, or you do something stupid because somebody told you. For example, there's a Santa Muerte Bible that's out there. It's in Spanish, and it was written by a palero. So because of that, there is a section on how to sacrifice chickens to Santa Muerte. But as I teach my students, I'm like, you don't sacrifice chickens to Santa Muerte because she's death. If you're killing things to honor death, you're doing her job for her. It's her job to decide. Yeah, it's her job to decide what lives and what doesn't live. So you're literally forcing her hand by doing that. And so that's why I try to explain that to people. Of course, they don't listen because people don't want to listen. They want to experience. So yeah,
I think mixing is an issue because it's okay to have some syncretism, absolutely, but things should be delineated in their own lines, because if you mix too many things back and forth, where does one end and the other one begin? You start to not know. And I don't by any means mean any offense to the spirits when I say this, but let's look at them as if they were animals for a moment. You can have multiple different animals and care for them and take care of them and be a good good parent to them, so to speak. But you wouldn't just let them all out at the same time into the same room, because maybe they're averse to one another. And if you do that, it's only a matter of time before they attack each other or attack you in ways. And obviously, Quimbanda talks heavily about Quiumbas. And that's what starts to happen within someone's practice, is they're like, oh, I work 7 different practices, but I have no delineating line, and they start to bleed over into one another. And then you start to see that this person becomes a radical, and they start to get a little weird, and you're like, oh, man, they're getting one on you. You don't realize, but you're infested right now with these Quiumbas, man. Like, they're destroying your life because you have no authority, so to speak, in any one of the paths, let alone overall. They're running rampant. The inmates run the asylum, so to speak. Yeah. And that's sad, and that happens a lot. Everybody just wants to do a little bit of everything with no guidance or delineating lines.
The animals analogy is gold. It's gold. That's a really good way to put it.
And that's how I've always looked at it. Is people are like, oh, but I mix this and that and that and this and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, why? It has its own path, brother. Like I have 5 different paths that I work, and every one is worked as its path. I'm not trying to crisscross. There's certain things that will, as you said, there are certain, like the conch shell you mentioned, or there's things that are going to be similar to one another, and they might have different aspects, but no, you can't just. I'm not doing Klipothic Quimbanda. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't work. So.
Well, and the other problem with that is that now we're starting to see people who refer to themselves as teachers, or even people in the community who like have shops doing the same thing, right? We're starting to see like, chapels dedicated to Pombagira, which is kind of strange. Like it's like a chapel to Pombagira, or we're starting to see, people mixing things like Palo and Quimbanda and putting it in their shops and saying, "Oh yeah, we practice Palo and Quimbanda, but it's the same thing, so we just practice it the same way." Or start to see like people calling Quimbanda, calling it Quimbanda, but it looks exactly like Palo, and vice versa. So we're starting to see a lot of that, and these are people in the community who are also being looked at, and people look up to them and say, "Oh well, they can do it, then I can do it." If they're willing to put that together, then I can also be a part of that type of thing. And so this is why I tell people, like, you have a responsibility to your community when you are a public figure or a public face. You have a responsibility to your community if you are teaching students. You have to be careful with that and make sure that you yourself, and this is as somebody who has been burned many times by bad teachers before, it's our responsibility to right those wrongs, right? I even had, for example, my online school, I had a person on there who was teaching classes for a while until I found out that they were basically just making everything up. And this is a person that I was learning from myself. And so I had to go there and like not only apologize to my students, but it took me a good solid almost year to really kind of like unlearn everything that I had been taught from them, and go back to the basics and just kind of like, okay, got to relearn everything because I don't know what this person taught, what was real and what was not, and so that was a big, it's a big thing, and it even happens to people like me who do work with students and have a community. Like we get duped also, so it's something that we just have to be very aware of, especially in these practices.
No, I 100% agree. You have to always be vigilant. Natasha and I, for our call, the big thing, the term that we've coined is question everything, including us. We always say question us. I don't care if I'm your mentor or teacher, not questioning. I want you to, because if you're not questioning, there's a problem. You always need to be questioning. Now, with the time we have left, I do want to jump into exactly what we were just talking about. What was the founding vision of your academy for Mictlan? Why don't you tell us what it is when you came up with this?
Yeah, so it's funny. Since I was young, I'd always wanted to have a school for witchcraft. I think it started, being a kid and watching The Worst Witch, with Tim Curry, and just like being like, oh man, it'd be so cool to live in a castle and like learn witchcraft every day. How much fun would that be? And then of course Harry Potter showed up and kind of ruined it in that perspective. But I think a big part of it was I had so many people coming to me wanting to learn like Santa Muerte, wanting to learn different types of practices, that I said, well, you know what? I would love to have like an apprenticeship, but I just don't have the time to sit and teach like individual people. So I decided to start with just like a small group of people. Originally, it was literally, I think, only like 10 students max when we first started. And then I was like, you know what, this is actually okay. I can let a few more in. And so I like started letting in like 20. And then before you know it, I was like, you know what, let's just do it. Let's just, so now it is an open school. It is something that started with just 3 sections. It was like a necromancy section, a witchcraft section, and a like healing section. But now it's an everything section. We teach everything from necromancy. I even have a wonderful Haitian voodoo teacher on there who teaches voodoo like nobody else. And I know that sounds like a gimmick, but she understands Haitian culture and society so well. And her teacher is a very well-known teacher, Maggie, which was Mama Lola's daughter. If you know Mama Lola, she's a very famous Buddha priestess. So she really understands the Loa, and she's doing literally a class per Loa, at least an hour, just her talking about the culture and history of this Loa, and it's stunning work. We have people like Alex Bujo, who is a wonderful brujeria and mostly brujeria practitioner from the Valley, who grew up with his mom being a bruja, and doing readings and doing all kinds of stuff as well. So he has a really great insight on more traditional style brujeria. And then the coolest thing about Mictlan Academy is we do 3 classes a month, and all 3 of them are filmed and recorded. And so now, and we're like at year 4, I think now, 3 or 4. We've got like 200 classes or something like that, and they're all pre-recorded. And then for the advanced students, that what I call the practitioners, we have what we call a Praktika, which is like an extra class, just going a little bit further for them, right? So, for example, with like a voodoo class, we might talk a little bit about the Loa, their history, and their offerings. For the advanced, the Praktika, we might go a little bit further into like how to do a working with them, how to start connecting with them. Same thing with like I have a whole series of Quimbanda on there, the way that I was taught by my teacher, like more what she calls Quimbanda pura, which is like pure Quimbanda, Quimbanda. It's more like old school style, basically. Yeah. But even now, like she has gone way like demonic. This has happened a lot in Brazil. A lot of houses are going like as satanic as possible. Let's bring it in.
It's gotten very big, the satanic Quimbanda. So like you have the Diego Oxosi talks about it in his book, where he says about like you have crossed line Quimbanda, you have the Luciferian Quimbanda, and you have traditional Quimbanda. There's 3 delineations, and a lot more are going crossed line or now breaching into the Luciferic or satanic Quimbanda. You are starting to see like Asmodeus's sigil in the background, and you're starting to see like Belial's sigil, and it's interesting. I mean, not that to each their own, but it is an interesting merger of Satanism and Quimbanda.
And that's exactly what it is. And I will say, like when I started learning from her originally, it was traditional Quimbanda. It was not crossed in any way. The only crossed aspect was caboclos sometimes showing up and pretavelhos, but most of the time it was just Quimbanda, Exu Pombagira. And then I guess what they say, you gotta follow the path everybody's going. So everybody started going Luciferian. She went for it, and now she's full blown Luciferian.
That'll happen when you work with the demons, man. They'll get you, as they say. You start working with them, they're like, oh, listen, we're gonna have you working with us in a multitude of different ways.
And she is now, but I'm like, I'm just gonna stick with Quimbanda.
Now, question with everything you're doing, what transformations do you see students commonly undergo through your academy?
I will say that there's a good pattern of students. So there's my lifers, people that have been there since the beginning. They are learning all the time. They just want to learn. Those are my favorite students because they want every topic. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, whether we go really far out, weird stuff, they love it, or they're just kind of like, I'll tune in when I can tune in. And a lot of them even kind of like it's like a podcast for them. They just kind of listen to people come into the store and they're like, I'm listening to you right now, like that kind of thing. And then there are some people that come in just for the specifics. Like, for example, when I do Quimbanda readings, people will be like, well, where can I learn more about Quimbanda? I'm like, well, I literally have 6 classes of it on my school. You can sign up for a month, watch all of them, and then just sign out and you're done. You've watched them all. And so I do get a lot of what I call drop-in students that come in and just kind of learn a topic and then head out. And then I will say that one of the few things that I do see there every once in a while is the student who kind of learns or goes through the academy and then surpasses, which is the goal. I always tell people that if you are a student of mine and you surpass me, you start clicking and getting even higher than I am, then that means I have done my job correctly, because this day and age, we see a lot of people more so like, I am your master, I am your teacher, and you can never be better than I am. And I'm like, that's never going to be me. You'll always be learning. You should always be learning. And if you can do better than I can, even better. Like, I will say this about my partner, Tito. I love Quimbanda. Quimbanda is beautiful. I love my relationship with Exu Pombagira. But he is on his way to passing me in Quimbanda for sure. Like he connects to Eshun Pomijira like nobody else does, and he like pretty soon I would tell him I was like, you're taking over the house eventually. Like it's all on you because you have it. You have a
Yeah.
connection with them that I just don't have, and I think that's a great thing because he started originally as a student. He was a part of Mictlan Academy, and that's kind of how we met. So I think that that's a big thing is to see students surpass me, to see them exceed is a wonderful thing, and that's the goal of anybody who calls himself a teacher. That should
100%.
be the goal. That should
And I see
definitely be the goal.
Natasha throwing her hands up because we're both in agreement on that. Everybody that we teach, our goal is for them to be greater than us. I think that there's this problem nowadays that there is so much gatekeeping from teachers, and there's so much messiah complex of like I am the top dog. No one can be beyond me. I'll never even give you the keys to be beyond me, and always keep you a little bit below me so that I can be that. No. My goal is I want you to blow me out of the water because then I have the privilege of saying like I helped and create that, not that as an ego flex, but like I was able to take my knowledge and make someone as beyond me so then they can do the same thing for their students and so on, and it continues that golden chain. And unfortunately there's not enough people that think like that. No one should ever, if you're confident within yourself, within your abilities and powers, you should never fear another man or another woman. So whenever you're holding someone else because you fear them in some sort of way, so it should be the opposite. You know, if you don't fear anyone, then give them everything you have so that they can excel beyond you. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
Well, and some people use it to their advantage too. So they'll be like, you know, you need spiritual work done. Well, you got to come to me and I'll do this. But then you got to come back in 3 more months, and then you got to come back in 6 more months. Or I'm gonna do a cleansing on you, and then you're back they're back a month later. You know, I always tell people like, if you're coming back to me after I've done a cleansing on you, then I did something wrong.
Yeah, you're not cleansed then.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I want to jump back to an old comment just because I want to throw it up here. It's fun. Maria said, "Wait till they discover the Transugothian were spiders," and she was talking about when people come and talking all kinds of crazy stuff. Now we're getting into, which I can't knock because I'm actually into it completely, but now we're getting into like the Bertio, Gnostic Voldoon aspects, which we can get into all the crazy alienistic Kenneth Grant stuff, which I love.
Oh yes.
No,
I was thinking of Kenneth Grant earlier when you were mentioning Clip-Hop as well.
Oh yeah, Kenneth Grant's a beast. A lot of people are like, I don't, you know, that's a funny divide about it because there is a lot of people that are like, yeah, I don't get it, man. Kenneth Grant was just talking some fantasy shit. I'm like, I don't know about that, man. I'm like, it seems like that to a lot of people, but I'm like, there's a certain section within magic that you can tap into some cartoony stuff. Maria also said, working in an occult shop in Seattle, I have really similar experiences with the weirdos who come in talking out their ass. Oh, you're going to. I mean, anything. It's just like anybody, though. Think if you owned a bike shop and, you know, you do like BMX, for example. You're going to have some jackoff that's going to come in and be like, oh, yeah, I used to be one of the best. I was on my way to being pro until I broke my ankle really bad. Meanwhile, this dude's never been any good at riding a bike ever in his life. There's always going to be those people that have to, for some reason, puff their chest out to try to get fake love.
Yeah, that's true. But I will say the spiritual people, though, they take the cake on it.
They do.
You know, especially, there's one thing that we always say. We said 2 things that we always say is like, if you're working spiritual path and your life is not getting better, then something's wrong. That's one thing. And the other thing is you should not try to substitute mental health for spirituality. Like there's a good, you got to keep a good balance of both.
Israel Regardi talked heavily on the fact that even an advanced practitioner every so often needs to have a psych evaluation done to make sure that you are not starting to slip into the grips of psychosis. Because what happens so often, especially with neophytes and dabblers, is they start to actually experience their first breadcrumbs of power. The spirit shows up. They see the spirit. They hear the spirit. They have their working flawlessly executed. And then they get God complex. It's like, I am the one. I am the chosen one. And it's like, no, bro, you're doing the same thing that millions have done before you. You had success with spirit, and that's beautiful and it's powerful. But don't let it make you think you're more than what you are. And it's easy if you don't check that. And if you don't have the right people in your circle to check you on that, then you can go down a deep, dark hole. And one of the questions I skipped earlier, but we'll just kind of touch it in a different way. We won't necessarily ask it, but discuss it. Was and I might have even got rid of it. I think I got rid of it. It was the whole concept of what is the biggest misconception of initiatory cults or initiatory practices, or covens or schools, anything where you're becoming a part of a body. And I think that it would have to be that people are afraid of it, thinking that there's a lot of abuse that can happen, and certainly, but there is this misconception. A lot of people say, well, I'm a solar practitioner, I don't need that. Well, a solar practitioner and a coven or cult or school are very different things. And a big part of this, guys, is if you don't have a school or a cult or a coven or something around you, a family, then you're not having someone check you. And once again, as I was saying, that's a way, it's a slippery slope, is you're working with your spirits. Maybe you're very devout and you don't talk to a lot of people, and you're just working more and more and more, and you become obsessed with your spirits. Maybe it's because, like us, we're children of Morsego, or maybe because they're feeding off of that and you're causing you to go crazy. You need people around you, whether it is a coven or cult, or whether it's just friends who you can talk it out with, so that they can check you on and say, hey, man, you're starting to be a little weird. But what do you think the biggest misconception of solar practitioners when looking at an initiatory type of structure?
Well, I will say this: it's a double-edged sword, because I do feel like some people only get initiated for titles. That's one thing. Some people also only get initiated specifically for ego, right? So, for example, in Haitian Voodoo, once you get initiated in Haitian Voodoo, you are a priest immediately. Same thing with Palo, right? If you get initiated, not in Gayo, but if you get initiated as a Tata or Yaya, you're automatically a priest or a priestess, and that's the title again. But it's also an egotistical thing, like I'm a priest, I'm a priestess. What people don't realize is that all initiation, even for priests and priestesses, is a very beginner level thing, because it's just simply giving you, if you will, the permission to work with those energies. It's an introduction. That's what it is. And I think that's the biggest misconception, is that solar practitioners think, well, I can connect to the Mpungo by myself, or I can connect to Pomajira Neshi by myself. You absolutely can. However, you did not have the divine connection, what we call transference, right? That transference, I think you can see here, this picture here with all these people on this portrait. This was given to me by my guru when I got initiated in Aghor tradition. The Baba that you can't really see because of the reflection in the back is the one who started the Aghor tradition, Baba Kinaram. And these other gurus here are the ones that of the lineage of that transference of power. And it doesn't mean transference of power like now I have their power. It just means now I have that knowledge that's been transferred down from another to another to another to another. And that's why I'm able to call myself my Aghor name of Sahadram, because it was given with the transference. Doesn't mean I'm a master, doesn't mean I'm a guru, doesn't mean that I can now go and do all these amazing things. It was just simply the initiatory way to start the path. It was the introduction from the actual transference of energy to the next. And so I think that a big part of what solar practitioners don't understand is, yes, what you said, 100%. Like, it's about having a group and people to check in on you, but also it's about not surrounding yourself with yes people. Sometimes we need no people in our lives to tell us, hey, no, that's not a thing. In the situation with Palo, and this is why I left Dragon Rouge originally, because my ego was like, because I was like practicing all these rituals in Dragon Rouge and getting amazing results. And I was like, wow, look at all this. And my head was like getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I was like, I'm going to practice Palo myself if no one's going to teach me. And my partner at the time was like, you're not going to do that. And I'm like, well, why not? And he's like, because it's an initiatory practice. I'm like, yeah, but I don't need that initiatory stuff. I could just build my prenda myself. And he was like, no, you can't, because there are secrets. There are secrets that only somebody who has practiced with. And I can tell you this right now. I can show you how to build prenda. I can literally show you step by step how to put the spirit on the pot, how to everything. I can do everything for you. It will, and you can even work that pot if you so choose. You can even actually do some work with it. but it will not be as strong as if you got scratched. Because when you get scratched, you are literally introduced to death, to the other side. You're killed. That's what it is. It is a ceremonial death that allows the spirits to not see you as human anymore. They see you simply as another spirit. But if you are a spirit, let me put this word, if you're a human in a spirit land, think about how much power you have now.
Yep.
Because they see you as spirit. You're in camouflage. They see you as spirit, but you're not spirit. You're a life force. You have power. You have dominion, right? So that's the difference. That's the transference of power. It's not just a title. It's not just a thing like that. Now, you did mention something really important, though. You said you got to be careful with, people not only who are egotistical, but there are people out there who will promise you things, who will tell you, oh, you're going to, I'm going to do this for you, that for you. And then they're just doing it for their own ego. They're doing it for money. They're doing it to take advantage of you sexually, even. That's a big thing that happens in a lot of these traditions. You have to research these people. Look at their godchildren. Go look at their godchildren. What are they doing? Are they acting right, or are they acting out of pocket, right? That's a big thing to look at as well, because if you're not careful, you're going to get yourself in a really bad situation. So that's another, you could literally have a whole talk on just that.
We did have a talk similar. I forget. It was Natasha and I's show, our show Caniculum Obscuritatis. We had an episode about initiatory and house abuse and some of these factions out there. And as you said, that's an important thing. Don't just look at the leader of the cult. Look at their godchildren, because if they're acting a fool left and right, you start to say, well, if he or she is not putting their godchildren in place, then it's a free-for-all. Something's going on. Why are they not putting them in place? So you start to see those leaks, so you know that there's a problem. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that out there.
And unfortunately, there is.
What do we have here? I missed something. I think there was a comment that came. No, I missed it. I thought there was a new comment, but there wasn't. Maria just said, we have a similar thing in Tibetan Vajrayana where we visualize the lineage tree, and that's where the power and protection comes from. And that's it. I mean, you can do these things without the transference, but without it, what's the point? You know what I mean? You're shooting blanks pretty much. Is you need to be able to have that hand-me-down. There's a reason that there is that tradition. Kabbalah, for example. Kabbalah means tradition. It's handed down. Yeah, you can read about it, but there's a difference between learning from a true master and it being handed down than just reading. So I think that's beautiful. We have a comment. Oh, yeah, going to get a CT scan and a mental check. I do my best to stay on top of things. I can usually tell if I'm having issues when I'm getting angry or obsessing on an item. Yeah, and that's the thing, brother. I know that you're working right now, as I've been helping guide you a little bit on the Klapothic side. If you let these spirits seep in too hard, obsession is one of the first things that you're going to have. Obsession, then oppression, and then full-blown possession, and that can be a problem. Where there are different paths that Alexis and I are talking about that welcome possession freely, and you are being embodied. It's a little different than when we're talking about the demonic side and when they possess. It's kind of a different thing. So, you have to be careful with that, because if you start to become obsessed, so we were talking about bones earlier, right? I had an obsession years ago with bones. I was working with a specific demon who loves bones, and I ended up losing myself and bought dozens upon dozens of human skulls and skeletons, and I surrounded my entire self down in this dungeon down here of human bones. It was a little weird. Not to say I still don't have. I still have a bunch. I was an oddities dealer for a little while, but I realized after a while, I become obsessed and oppressed by this obsession with bones. And then I was able to break that chain. And overnight, I still like bones, but it just stopped. And I'm like, shit, yeah, there was something that had a hold of me hard. So you have to be careful with that, man. So always do your mental checks. Maria says, we have
very similar things happening.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
It is very interesting.
But yes, yeah, and it had like 5-6 skulls at one point. Now I'm down to like one. So I get that. Mhm.
Yeah, it could become a problem. Last couple questions and we'll finish out. We're already past our time, so we'll make it quick. The last couple I want to ask here is, how do you ensure these traditions remain respectful and not watered down?
Oh, wow. I mean, that's a big part of the Mictlan Academy is the education. You know, in
Mhm.
even having a witch shop is education. You know, how many times have you been to a botanica or a witch shop and like the person behind the counter doesn't even acknowledge you? They're just like, "Hey, how's it going?" You know, that's not our shop. You walk into our store, the first thing we do is like, "Hey, how can I help you today? What do you ever, you know, what do you need help with?" And if you're like, well, I'm just kind of looking around, like, okay, cool. And like, what kind of things do you practice? Like, we want to know
Yeah.
because if we can help you in some way, we will. And we're very much all about education at our shop, obviously through the school as well. It's about educating people and helping them understand why is this a tradition? What is the purpose of the tradition? Why is it still an initiatory tradition? Why isn't it just open to everybody? And what is the purpose of the initiation? What is the purpose of the next step after that? Is there a next step after that? You know, um, I get this a lot, and this is something that happened to me even personally. I get a lot of people who practice Palo who will come to me and say, I got initiated in Palo, and then I got my Lucero or I got my Branda, and then I never like heard from my godfather ever again, or
Yeah.
they never taught me anything. And this happens a lot. And this happened to me even. The Tata I first got scratched with, he was like, I thought for sure that once I scratched you, that my Tata would step in and teach me more, but he never did. And so he's like, I feel so bad that I can only teach you what I know. And I said, that's fine. At least you're teaching me something. But I said, but he's not teaching me anything, you know? And then I had this other person come in who was like, I can teach you everything. And then turned out it was like all BS, you know?
Hmm.
But I think a big part of it is, you know, trying to keep those traditions going. We have to be educated and we have to educate ourselves. And if we're going to take on a God child, we need to be able to also know what the hell we're talking about, right? That's why people say all the time, like, oh, well, you know, I want to be your godson in Paulo. I'm like, no, I'm not ready to be a godfather in Paulo. I know a lot about Paulo, but I can't go and teach you every ceremony. And until I get to that place, I'm not going to do that, right? And it's kind of the same thing with Quimbanda. I mean, I do have, we call them children, not godchildren. I have children in Quimbanda, but at one point when I was seeing that it was mostly myself and my partner doing all the work, doing all the jira ourselves, cleaning up after ourselves, buying all the materials, and the children weren't stepping up. I said, nope, we're not doing this anymore. So until you all are ready to step up and be here and, you know, clean the animals and do all those things, until we want to be a running house, I'm not going to be you know, busting my ass for y'all. You'll have to be busting your ass for the issues of Bombagira. It's not
Yeah,
for
it's
me.
not a tag along. It's not us doing all the work, and you just show up to kind of reap the benefits. It's
Yeah,
I shouldn't even have to tell you as I'm jumping in and doing something. You should jump in. How can I help? Or just jump in and start helping. And if for some
exactly.
reason it's something you shouldn't be helping on, then I'll maybe slap your hand away and say, "Hey, no, you can't do it." But
They can't
be a
do that.
part of it.
Yeah.
Be a part of doing it. Don't just
hmm
stand back and be the watcher. Too many people just stand as the congregation. It's like, are you here to be a part of this, or are you here to watch it? Because if I wanted
Yes.
to have a watch party, I would have fucking promoted it as such. You're
Yeah.
here to work. Let's work.
You know, I will say this, like, and I mentioned Tito earlier about how dedicated and how connected to Kimanda he is. He was working at the shop, and he still is. He's the manager there, but he started working at the shop, and on his days off, he was there asking me questions about Kimbanda,
Right.
asking about Eshu and Pomajira, asking me about what, you know, how do they do their offerings, how do we, you know, like he wanted to know, and and he's been the closest I've ever had to somebody who really actually wanted to learn. Other people, they're like, I want to take a class with you, or I want to, you know, if you show up. A good example of this too is that my co-owner, his godson, who's going to be initiated in December in Santeria, he goes to the church. He goes to the shop every Thursday to ask him questions about Santeria, right? To learn essentially.
Hmm.
If you're showing up at my door every other day and wanting to learn something, I'm going to teach it to you. But if you're just like, I want to learn from you, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to force you by the hand, grab you by the hand, say, let me go teach you Palo.
Yeah.
Let me go teach you Quimbanda.
Do
You
you want
have to show
here?
me. You have to show me that you want to be here, that you want to actually want to learn, that you are not going to be able to sleep until you know this path.
And that's so
That's
rare.
dedication.
That
It is.
dedication is so rare because like it's glitz and glamour and fun until people have responsibility. Everybody wants to have fun and be a part of it, see the spirit, But
Yeah.
whenever you start to say, okay, well, in order to be able to encounter these spirits, in order to be able to be initiated or walk this path, I need you to do A, B, C, and X, Y, and Z every day or every week for the rest of your life. And I need you to be able to trust that you're doing it. I'm going to check in to make sure you're doing it. And I have expectancies that these things need to be done and done efficiently. They might at first, okay, within a couple weeks or a couple months, it's like you see them flaking off. It's like, why can't you, keep up with it? And they don't tell it to you, but then you can read it right off of this isn't fun anymore. It's like, well, this was never about fun. Spirituality isn't about fun. It's about growth, and growth is painful. Growth isn't fun. So if you're here for fun, get the fuck out because it's about growth. Let's feel some pain together because that's what we're about to go through.
Yeah, well, and a big thing, for example, is you mentioned this earlier, people watching those videos of Quimbanda and seeing them slaughter all the animals and all those things, and they're like, oh, that's so crazy, that's so cool, I can't believe they're doing that. And then they go to the Jita and they're like, well, why isn't anybody possessed?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because it takes years for development. It takes years for a person who is medium to be able to get ridden by the Ashupo Majida. So if you're not getting possessed, it's because you're not dedicating. You need to dedicate yourself. You need to be sitting with your Ashupo Majida every day, connecting to their energy, connecting to their current, and understanding which one is going to show up. Is it going to be both of them? Is it going to be one of them? Who is going to show up? And so this whole idea of and this is I'm being candid. I had children who were literally coming in like, oh, well, there's no point in going to the Jitas anyway because the issues don't show up. And I'm like, that's not the point. The point is not for them to show up. The point is for us to be honoring them, doing the offerings for them, celebrating them. And if they show up, we should be so privileged that one of them shows up because that's not the point. The point is not for them to show up in possession. That is your responsibility as a medium to connect to your Ashupo Majida so that they do show up. Right? That's the difference.
And I think that's what's lacking is the reverence behind it is a lot of times missing. Is everybody wants the fireworks show? You know what I mean? That's great, but 99% of the work you do will not be the fireworks show. That's only the 1%. The 99 is what you have to learn to love. And when that 1% happens, it's like, all right, yes, like this is such an honor. But the 99, instead of hating it, instead of being against it or finding it a burden, that's what you need to fall in love with. As I teach my folks in my cult, is like prayer. That, as we mentioned earlier, that can be, sometimes you can get pissed at it. You're like, fuck, like I don't want to do this right now. And you're sitting here reading, you're like, this isn't causing anything to happen right now. No, it's causing everything to happen. What you're doing right now, 2 years from now is what's going to happen. Tomorrow's it's a consistent keeping that flow, that mandala going. It's that energy that keeps circulating. If you miss a day, if you miss a week, and all that energy just dies. But if you keep it going, it oscillates faster and faster to cause those booms. And unfortunately, people don't see that. We do have a comment here. And I have one more question to wrap this up. Absolutely, both from the teacher and priestess standpoint, and also from the girl who started by asking an obnoxious amount of questions. Yes, you did.
And you did it right.
And you did it right. That's what I said. Bother the fuck out of me. If
I was going to say really quickly, like American spiritualism. If you look at the people who were like actual physical mediums that could make like trumpets float and have, get trance and all kinds of things like that. Those mediums studied for years, not months, years. There's a very famous medium who was able to literally do manifestations of spirit in broad daylight. 32 years of training. 32 years. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen overnight. It
doesn't end. There's no ending point either. Nope. There is no finish line. You're always learning. You're always growing. I always say that I'm a student on his first day of class, eager to learn. No matter how far I come, I'm always a student on his first day. And like you said, the people want that glitz and glamour. They want that experience, or they want that possession, scarily enough, where they're like, I want it and I want it now. And it's like, you are a beginner, but I want it. And it's like, You're not even beginning to be ready to have something come down and take a hold of you right now. I promise you don't.
I hope it does. I hope it does.
Let me watch that happen. You're going to be sore as fuck for a while, and you're going to be rattled.
You may not come back.
Yeah, you might be stuck that way. Now, the last question of the night, Alexis, is at the end of your life, what do you want your spirits to remember you for?
Wow. Okay. I don't know why that got me really emotional thinking about that. I think that
I like that.
I think that more than anything, I always tell people a lot of this is me cramming for the finals, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm working with spirit every day, if I'm working with the dead every day, and I work with them respectfully, there are a lot of people out there, Baletos especially, that will not respectfully work with the dead. They forcibly work with the dead. They like, you will do my bidding or else, that type of thing. I'm very respectable with my spirit. Hey, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, right? That type of thing. But I will say this. My finals, when I finally do make the journey crossing over to the other side, is the hope that like I've served my spirits so well that we can just continue where we left off on this new journey, essentially. And they're elevated enough to help me on my elevation as I enter on that path. That's a big thing we talk a lot about in these traditions, especially in Quimbanda, in Palo, even with Santa Muere and all these other paths. It's about elevation of spirit, allowing our spirits to be elevated on the other side so that they can do work for us, so they can help us, they can guide us, but also we elevate ourselves. This is something we even see in spiritualism, this idea of like we work with the spirits of the dead because eventually we're going to be a spirit of the dead. And if we can cross over with that knowledge already, then we come in at a higher level than random Joe Schmo who's like, I didn't think I was going to die today. And now they're on the other side and they're like, what the hell's going on? Where am I? Where am my family? Where, that type of thing. So we're at a higher level already when we get to that other side. Absolutely. So I would say that's the goal. The goal is to get there. And I always tell people, am I afraid of death? No. What I'm mostly afraid of is that I have so much stuff that I want to get done before I go. And I think that's what I'm more afraid of than death itself, So, yeah.
No, that makes sense. I literally, it's like the same answer I would have given, is that there's so many things I want to do before I go, so many books I want to read, so many projects I want to finish. That would be what I'd be afraid of. But 100% what you said is that I am able to have such a rapport with my spirits that when I pass, we can continue that path and they can carry me on. For example, we mentioned Morcego earlier. To be welcomed into the fold of Eshu Morcego and be one of them would be the ultimate goal, right? So we'll see how it plays out. But folks, as we said earlier, that is the hard work. That's the dedication day in and day out. That's not the glitz and glamour. So work your ass off. You can see what's possible someday by doing it day in and day out. Now, just got some final comments here. Praying for the animus so that when we are gone and they are elevated, they can pray for us. Absolutely.
Yep.
And last thing I want to ask, and then we'll wrap up for the evening, is Alexis, tell us where we can check out your work, anything you think we should be aware of regarding you or your shop, your school, your books, any of that.
Okay. Okay. So you can find me on Instagram at Journey to Mictlan. You mentioned Carlos Castaneda earlier. That's my little play on Journey to Islam, but it's Mictlan, which is the Mexica underworld.
Yep.
You can also find me, of course, at City Alchemist. That's also on social media. We have a website as well, cityalchemist.com. You can also find me at Mictlan Academy, which is through a Patreon. It's a Patreon school. You can join for as long as you want, a month, 2 months, whatever. It charges you every month, and you can literally go in for a month and just binge watch everything for 30 days and then just zoom on out if that's what you want to do too. And then where you can find some, like, project-wise, one thing that's ongoing is I do work with the American Spiritualist Church here in town. We do services every Sunday. I'm usually one of the mediums, so I do a lot of mediumship, even over Zoom. And then Other kind of fun projects, we have a traditional witchcraft class coming up, talking a little bit more about kind of what we're talking about here. So not traditional witchcraft in the like more European sense, but more so kind of like, you know, we were talking about like animals and all kinds of crazy stuff. That's mostly what it's going to be, and working with nature. That's coming up through City Alchemist. And then my co-owner and I have been working on our own publishing company. We did publish 2 books with a previous publisher, and now that we have a few people who've been wanting to write, we actually are starting a book company called Temple Press, and we have some really cool things coming up in the horizon. We've got a Santa Muerte book coming out. We've got a book on traditional Mexican witchcraft coming out by Alex, the guy who teaches it in my school. We have books coming out on we actually a really cool hoodoo book coming out from Texas hoodoo, which is not something you really hear a lot about.
No.
So we've got some really cool things on the horizon, but we just, you know, we also run 2 other companies, so we're just like trying to find the time to get it all done.
Oh, yeah. It's always a challenge.
It's always a challenge, but we are working on it, and we're trying to get there. But you can always reach out. You can reach out to me through Instagram. You can email me, whatever you need to do. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. You can even reach out to me through Mictlan Academy, whatever works best for you. I always try to help out in any way that I can.
No, that is awesome, folks. Make sure you check out the website, the school, the books, the publishing house coming up, all the projects that Alexis is doing, always doing great stuff. Make sure you follow his Instagram page as well. Alexis, as I said earlier, thank you so much for coming on. It has been an honor. I loved our conversation. There's still so much I wish we could have talked about, but that time flies by. In fact, we went well over. So maybe we'll have to have you on again to catch up on some of those other questions.
I would love to. This is a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, guys, the dead do not leave us. We leave them, and some of us choose to return. Our gratitude to Alexis Arredondo for guiding us through the crossroads of Latin magic, of necromancy, Quimbanda, and Palo Mayombe, the Aghor traditions, and the long road of devotion to Santa Muerte. His life's work reminds us that power is not learned. It is earned through blood, through silence, through memory, and through offering. May your altars stay warm, your spirits honored, and your path fearless in the presence of the dead. I am Frater Crow, and this is Knights of the Nephilim. We'll catch you next time. Ave Noctis.